My husband wasn't just a partner. He was the architect of a nightmare, and the suitcase he handed me held the only evidence that could keep us both from spending decades behind bars. I had 5 minutes to decide whether to play the victim he wanted or the witness who would tear his entire organized scheme to the ground. The silence in our living room was heavy, a suffocating blanket that seemed to absorb the light from the dying embers in the fireplace. My husband, Mark, stood by the hallway closet, his knuckles white as he gripped the handle of my suitcase. He wasn't looking at me. His gaze was fixed somewhere past my shoulder, directed at the front door as if he were checking for an exit that didn't exist. Only an hour ago, the atmosphere had been volcanic. His mother, Elena, had decided, once again, that her son's marriage was a catastrophic error, and she had spent the afternoon meticulously dismantling my character. But this time, she had gone too far. She had brought up things from my past, private matters that only someone with a penchant for professional-grade stalking could unearth, and she had weaponized them in front of Mark. "You need to go, Sarah," Mark said, his voice flat, stripped of the warmth I had relied on for the past 5 years. He began folding my sweaters with a strange, clinical precision. "She's not going to stop until she sees you gone. If you stay, she'll dig deeper. She's already contacted people who have the power to destroy everything we've built. She's framing this as if I'm involved in some kind of organized scheme, and she's threatening to bring the service of internal security to my doorstep." My heart hammered against my ribs. "Mark, what are you talking about? Your mother is a retired school teacher, not a mastermind of a criminal underworld. Why are you letting her scare you like this?" He finally turned, and the look in his eyes stopped me cold. It wasn't fear of his mother. It was a cold, hard recognition of a trap being closed. "You don't understand, Sarah. She's not just being a difficult mother-in-law. She's part of a network that has been watching us for months. She's planting evidence. She's already managed to hide illegal weapons in the attic of my workshop, and she's left traces of prohibited substances in our car. If I don't get you out of here, if I don't make it look like you left because of a domestic squabble, the Internal Security Service is going to raid this house before sunrise." I felt the blood drain from my face. The pieces started falling into place with a sickening click. The strange cars parked down the street, the flickering lights on our security system that I had dismissed as glitches, the way Elena had insisted on having a key to every lock in our home. "Why?" I whispered, my voice trembling. Why would she want to pin an attempt to break my life with criminal charges on her own son? Mark shoved the suitcase toward me and grabbed my shoulders, his grip bruising. Because she's protecting someone else, and she thinks that by sacrificing us she can clear the path for a different future. I've been trying to neutralize their influence for weeks, but I'm running out of time. You have to go to your sister's. Don't use your phone. Don't use your credit cards. Take the cash I left in the glove compartment and drive. Don't look back." He shoved me toward the door, his eyes darting toward the window. Outside, a black sedan had just pulled up to the curb, its headlights cutting through the darkness like twin daggers. I saw Elena step out of the vehicle, not with the frail gait of an older woman, but with the posture of a predator, sensing the kill. She wasn't alone. 2 figures emerged from the shadows behind her, moving with a synchronized, tactical precision that had nothing to do with family drama. Mark turned to the kitchen drawer, pulling out a heavy set of keys, his face set in a mask of grim determination. "They aren't here for a conversation, Sarah. They're here to ensure that when the internal security check happens, there's no one left to defend the truth." He looked at me, a brief, agonizing flicker of love crossing his face before it vanished behind a wall of cold resolve. "Run! Through the back gate! Now!" I sprinted toward the mudroom, the sound of glass shattering in the front hallway echoing behind me like a gunshot. I fumbled with the back door latch, my hands shaking so violently I nearly dropped my keys. As I threw the door open to the night, I heard a voice, cold, melodic, and terrifyingly familiar, drift through the house. It was Elena's voice, but it sounded completely foreign, devoid of any warmth or maternal pretense. "Don't bother looking for her, Mark," she said, her tone smooth as silk. "I've already secured the perimeter. You really shouldn't have tried to hide the hard drive in the lining of her luggage." I froze in the doorway. My hand flew to the suitcase handle. I hadn't packed it. He had. I turned around just in time to see Mark drop to his knees, not in submission, but in preparation. He reached into his waistband, and as the moonlight caught the metallic glint of what he was pulling out, I realized with a jolt of pure horror that my husband hadn't been fighting his mother to save our marriage. He had been part of this nightmare all along. The metallic glint of the weapon in Mark's hand was the final piece of a puzzle I never wanted to solve. The man I had shared my bed with for 5 years, the man who brought me coffee every Sunday morning and planned our future vacations, was staring at the front door with the cold, calculating eyes of a stranger. My legs turned to lead. The back door was still open, the cool night air biting at my skin, but I couldn't move. I watched in paralyzed silence as Mark stood up, his posture shifting from that of a beaten husband to something far more lethal. Elena stepped into the living room, her silhouette framed by the harsh beams of the flashlights the two figures behind her were carrying. She didn't look like a grandmother anymore. She looked like an executioner. "Did you really think I wouldn't notice you moving the assets, Mark?" she asked, her voice devoid of the fake tremors she used when she played the part of the grieving, ignored mother-in-law. "You were always the sentimental one. You wanted to protect her? You wanted to build a little life for her, thinking you could escape the debt we owe?" "I was never going to let you touch her, Elena," Mark replied, his voice a low, steady growl. He didn't even glance back at me. He kept his eyes locked on his mother, his finger resting near the trigger. "The files are encrypted. You won't get the codes unless I'm breathing. You know that. Kill me, and you lose the keys to the entire organized scheme you've spent the last decade building." My head was spinning. The files? The assets? What had I been living in the middle of? I remembered the nights Mark stayed late at the office, the mysterious business trips that he claimed were for his consultancy firm, and the sudden influx of money that we had laughed off as a lucky break. It wasn't luck. It was the payout from this dark reality. I clutched the handle of the suitcase so tightly that the plastic dug into my palm, drawing blood. The hard drive, the one Elena mentioned, was in my bag, and I was holding the key to their entire world. "Sarah, dear," Elena said, her eyes finally finding mine in the shadows of the mudroom. She smiled, a thin, cruel expression that didn't reach her eyes. "You've been a wonderful distraction. Honestly, you provided such a perfect domestic cover that even our associates in the service of internal security were fooled for years. But you've served your purpose, and now you've become a liability." "She knows nothing," Mark spat, taking a step toward them, effectively blocking their line of sight to me. "She knows enough," one of the men behind Elena interjected, his voice raspy and devoid of humanity. He started moving forward, his hands checking the gear strapped to his chest. "She was the one who signed for the last shipment of restricted equipment. Her fingerprints are all over the paperwork, Mark. The internal security check won't just be looking for the hard drive, they'll be looking for the accomplice. I realized then that my husband hadn't been protecting me from his mother. He had been using me as a scapegoat. The suitcase, the safety he offered, the rush to get me out of the house, it was all a setup to have me caught by the authorities with the incriminating evidence in my possession. If I left, I would be the one caught carrying the burden of their crimes. If I stayed, I would be caught in the crossfire of their power struggle. "Drop the bag, Sarah," Mark said, his tone shifting into a demand. He was looking at me now, and for the first time, I saw the true terror in his eyes. He wasn't afraid of them killing me. He was afraid of me giving them up. "Give them the bag and run into the woods. I'll handle the rest." "Don't listen to him," Elena hissed, raising a small, sleek device that looked like a remote. "If you run, he'll just trigger the tracker. You'll be found by our people long before you reach the main road." I looked from Mark's desperate, lying face to Elena's cold, triumphant one. My heart was racing, my chest tight. I realized that the back door wasn't just my escape route, it was the only place where I could potentially find a hiding spot. But as I shifted my weight to turn, the sound of sirens wailed in the distance. Real police sirens. Not the Internal Security Service, but the local authorities. "You called them," Mark shouted, his composure shattering as he turned to his mother. "You called the police to a crime scene involving an organized scheme? Are you insane? They'll tear everything apart." Elena's face paled. She hadn't expected the arrival of the police. For the first time, the predator looked genuinely rattled. "I didn't call anyone," she whispered, her gaze darting to the window. The blue and red lights began to dance against the walls of the kitchen. And then a voice boomed from a megaphone outside, a voice I recognized instantly as the local sheriff, a man known for his rigid, uncompromising morality. "This is the police. We have the property surrounded. We received a tip about illegal weapons and prohibited substances on the premises. Come out with your hands up, or we will breach the entry points." Mark turned back to me, his face a mask of panicked rage. He grabbed my arm, dragging me into the center of the kitchen, pulling me toward him as a human shield just as the front door was kicked off its hinges. The room erupted into chaos, but amidst the shouting and the blinding flashlights, I felt something cold and hard press against my ribs. Mark wasn't looking at the door anymore. He was whispering into my ear, his voice barely audible over the roaring police sirens. "You're going to tell them that you're the mastermind, Sarah. You're going to tell them I was your hostage, or I swear, before they even get across this room, I will make sure you never walk out of here." The room was a swirling vortex of blinding strobe lights and shouted commands. The sheriff's men had breached the perimeter, their weapons drawn, turning our cozy home into a terrifying arena of judgment. Mark's grip on my arm was ironclad, his pulse drumming against my skin, erratic and panicked. He pressed the cold metal object deeper into my side, his breath hitching as the police officers surged into the kitchen, their boots thundering on the hardwood. "Drop your weapons! Get on the ground!" the sheriff roared, his voice cutting through the panic. Elena had vanished into the shadows of the pantry, her composure replaced by the frantic scurrying of someone who knew the game was lost. Mark leaned in, his lips grazing my ear, his voice a chilling whisper of desperation. "Do it, Sarah. Tell them you're the one in charge. If you don't, we both go down, but I'll make sure you go down with a bullet in your back first." I looked at the officers. I saw the fear in their eyes. They weren't just here for a routine check. They knew they were walking into something much larger. I realized then that Mark's threat was hollow. He was a cornered rat, terrified that the life he'd built on lies was crumbling. He needed me to take the fall because he was a coward who couldn't face the consequences of his own darkness. "I'm the one," I shouted, my voice surprisingly steady, catching the attention of the officers. Mark's eyes widened, a momentary flash of triumph flickering in his gaze. "I'm the one who brought the illegal weapons here. I'm the one who orchestrated it all." Mark smirked, his grip relaxing just a fraction as he prepared to step away, ready to play the role of the coerced, innocent husband. But I wasn't finished. I dropped the suitcase to the floor with a heavy thud, and as I did, I kicked it. Not away from me, but directly toward the lead officer. "The hard drive!" I screamed. "It's inside! The records of the entire organized scheme are in that lining, and he's holding a weapon under his jacket." The room seemed to freeze for a heartbeat. Mark's expression shattered, shifting from triumph to sheer, unadulterated shock. He lunged for me, but the momentum was gone. The officers, alerted by my shout, didn't hesitate. They swarmed him with the precision of a professional team, pinning him to the floor before he could even reach for his waistband. He thrashed and roared, his mask of the loving husband dissolving into a torrent of incoherent rage as he was cuffed and dragged toward the door. Elena was pulled from the pantry moments later, her face white as a sheet, her silence deafening as she was led away in handcuffs. The nightmare that had held me captive in my own home was being dismantled in a matter of minutes. The house grew quiet save for the hum of the police radios and the rhythmic pulsing of the sirens outside. An investigator approached me, wrapping a shock blanket around my shoulders. He was gentle, his eyes searching mine. "We've been building a case against this group for over a year, Sarah," he said softly. "We needed someone on the inside to provide the final link, the evidence of the Inner Circle's operations. You risked everything to get that drive out of the house. You're not a suspect. You're the key witness who just brought down a multi-state network." I watched as they wheeled Mark out to the cruiser. He looked up at me through the rain-slicked window, his face twisted in a mixture of hatred and disbelief. He had tried to break me, tried to use me as a shield, but in his arrogance, he had forgotten one thing. I was the one who knew where the keys were kept. As the sun began to peek over the horizon, painting the sky in soft hues of pink and gold, I sat on the porch steps, the weight of the last few years finally lifting from my shoulders. The internal security team arrived shortly after, and the process of cleaning up the wreckage began in earnest. I had lost my home, my husband, and the life I thought I knew. But as I watched the black sedans drive away, taking the architects of my misery with them, I felt a strange, profound sense of peace. The huge sentence Mark was facing wouldn't be enough to pay for what he'd stolen from my soul, but it would be enough to keep him behind bars for decades. Elena, the mastermind who thought she could sacrifice me for her own ends, would spend the rest of her days in a sterile cell, far from the power she craved. I stood up, leaving the house behind. I had no idea what tomorrow would bring, or where I would go. But for the first time in 5 years, the air didn't smell like deception. It smelled like rain and dirt, and the sharp, clean possibility of a future that belonged entirely to me. I walked toward the police car waiting to take me to safety, not looking back at the wreckage of my old life. The silence that followed wasn't suffocating anymore. It was the quiet of a life finally reclaimed.